Hello and welcome to episode 164. Television show is part two of Sutton Impact Family Style. I'm Jason.
And I'm Bill. And before we start our movies, just kind of give you my take on the world of sports right now for a couple minutes. I'll let you riff on this. I see these things about football playing in front of no fans or baseball playing in front of no fans. That's half the problem. The problem is if the guys play and you really don't want them exposed to the disease, you got to lock them up afterwards.
Yeah.
And you got to keep them locked up till the next game. So theoretically, you'd have to lock them up all season. And I think it was Mike Trout said, he's not playing in a biosphere, which it would be just about that's what it would be. And that's really a big issue. So I don't see those kind of goofy things happening. I don't think the players will go for it. And I wouldn't blame them. I mean, Mike Trout said his wife's having a baby. You're going to keep him locked up for 6 months? I don't think so. And the other thing is, I'm advocating with all my clients right now that they need to hire what I'm calling a chief health, safety, and fan wellness officer. So every organization should have their own Dr. Fauci.
Yes.
And his job is to make sure that everything is safe for the fans. Food, the parking, anytime you interchange with a ticket taker, go into your seat, the usher, the whole bit. And that's got to be their job. So when they say it's safe, it really is safe. And I just think that the fans are going to need some kind of assurance like that. So I'm pleased that a couple of my clients are already doing it, and the Lightning is way far ahead on it.
Yeah.
They're changing out air handling units and a number of different things. So I'm really blown away. I mean, people get it. They understand that this is going to be the issue. People won't come back unless they think it's safe. I mean, probably 40% of the people come back regardless.
Right.
The majority of people won't come back unless they know it's safe.
Yeah, we saw the live feed of the Jacksonville beaches. People aren't smart, so.
Yeah, and that was the last beach to close and the first beach to open. So Clearwater hasn't opened yet, but it'll probably open next week.
Yeah, it's the perfect meme because now you have the guy from Jaws saying it's perfectly safe to go back in the water.
Yep, it's exactly what it is. Mayor Jaws, Governor Jaws.
Governor Jaws, exactly.
So the way I read it is you're allowed to walk on the beach, jog on the beach, swim in the water, walk your dog.
Yeah.
And that's it. You're not allowed to sit on the beach on a towel. You're not allowed to have a chair. You're not allowed to barbecue on the beach. You're not allowed to put a tent up or an umbrella up and hang out under that. So, and I know they're going to break that rule. I mean,
it almost seems like letting people sit on the beach would be the best way to maintain the actual social distancing.
Except they don't.
Except
they
don't.
Closer and closer together, and they're going to want to be under an umbrella or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They just can't do it. I mean, I've been around. I tell people we changed the spelling to Florida to FLORI-DUH, like Homer would say it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's pretty accurate what Florida is. It's an embarrassment.
I mean, I understand people are eager to get back, but we really mean, like I said, if you talk about fans going in, you're going to have, if they open it to fans anytime soon, you're talking about multiple seats in between everybody, so nobody's sitting next to each other. You're talking about taking people's temperature on the way in. And even though temperature is a good indication of something, it doesn't really even prove that somebody even has it. So,
the Lightning talked about taking people's temperature on the way in, testing every employee every night.
Right, and there's still not enough tests to go around, so it's...
And what I advocate to one of my clients, Jason, it's an NFL team.
Yeah.
And I said, what you might have to do is you might have to take the season and divide the season into even number games and odd number games. And your season ticket indicates which numbers you can go to. And that way you should be able to have somebody every other season. You have to
presumably, yeah.
The arena. You have to reconfigure the arena because the 4 people who get to go to the game, they're not going to sit next to each other. So,
well, hopefully some of these crazy states just continue the social distancing and less of the screaming and taking away our freedoms, and we get working really hard on a vaccine because I think that's the only thing that's in me.
All right. So, and one other thing, I took a picture, or a friend sent me a picture of about a 7-foot alligator in his driveway last night. So the alligators, with less people moving around, less people going outside, they're kind of walking down the streets of your neighborhood right now. So what's that movie you like, Jack?
Oh, Crawl.
There you go.
Yeah.
We saw Crawl last night.
Nice.
So I posted on my Twitter if anybody wants to see what an alligator in somebody's driveway looks like in the evening. And I guess I'm ready. I'll start the show, Jason.
Okay, start it up. Let's go.
I'm going to start with what was at the time, and in retrospect is, one of the most groundbreaking television series ever, was Hill Street Blues.
Yes.
Stephen Bochco, for a real portrayal of the police, supposedly set in Pittsburgh, in Hill Street. And that's where it was, Hill District, that's where it was set, with Carnegie Mellon. But a real, his first show to introduce nudity on network TV and using questionable vocabulary. I mean, it tested the boundaries. It also showed there's good sides of cops and bad sides of cops. It's very, very realistic. And it showed sometimes that cops and bad guys have to work together. So shows like The Wire and different things that came later on owe a lot of their success to Hill Street Blues, which was in the 70s, I believe.
Yeah, and I know from reading books, that show gets shouted out a lot. As you said, it operates in gray, not in black and whites. You had a lot of complex stories, complex characters, like not easy answers. And like you said, good cops, bad cops, medium cops. Like it wasn't heroes.
Yeah, they don't win every week.
Right, which is...
They don't solve every crime. I mean, it was a realistic portrayal as opposed to the cop shows that came before that where everything was tied up in an hour and it was done. With Hill Street Blues, you could have the same storyline going for 4 or 5 episodes, which was very new to TV at the time.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to...
I want to shout out to Mr. Bochco and the great work he did with Hill Street Blues.
Yes. Well, I'm going to go with Atlanta, which is a fairly new show, only 2 seasons. It's Donald Glover, Childish Gambino, however you know him as. It's his show on FX. FX is typically known for sort of giving control to the artists that they hire. They sort of get carte blanche, like go make the show you want to make. And I know from reading psychological books, the reason shows like Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon and all these shows are so popular is because they're familiar. Because when you go into that show, you kind of know the jokes before the jokes are said. And nothing is going to surprise you. Like, those shows aren't going to surprise you. They're comfort food. It's the bland bowl of mac and cheese. No offense to those shows, but a little offense tended because I think they're kind of lame. But Atlanta is a show that every time you watch, besides being brilliantly acted, brilliantly written, you just never know what every episode is going to be. Like, you're watching, Paperboy is sort of one of the rapper protagonists in the show. And there's an episode where he's trying to walk home. And just based on watching a few episodes of Atlanta, you don't know if it's going to be a comedy, you don't know if it's going to be a drama, if it's going to shift into horror. You just never know what you're going to get. But what you're going to get is really deep, thoughtful, thought-provoking television, which is something that I love. So Atlanta is a show that if you can check out, definitely worth checking out.
Okay. I'm also going to go back in time again, this time to the 1960s, and give a shout-out to the Twilight Zone. Which if you have sci-fi on your cable, Sci-Fi Network, they run a lot of Twilight Zone marathons where they run episodes for 2 or 3 days, and they're all 30-minute episodes. Rod Serling was a developer, great storyteller. And some of these things just really will shake you up. They're really, really good, hard-hitting stories. And it was on Friday nights when I grew up, and it preceded the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. And it was a really nice night of horror and mystery. That was a real part of my growing up, and I really, I'll still, whenever I see the Twilight Zone marathon now, I'll still surf and I'll watch 3 or 4 episodes every time.
Well, as they were
really just a well done, classic short story kind of a thing, like a Ronald Dahl would be a writer for Twilight Zone. So real short, hard hitting, able to tell a story in 30 minutes, and always, not always, but a lot of times really hit you hard between the eyes with something that you might not have acknowledged could happen, but all of a sudden after watching the show you think, maybe.
It definitely, you can see the seeds in a show like Black Mirror, which I know is sort of a hour long and it's a little bit more dystopian, yeah. But I mean, you can see that, Black Mirror certainly had its roots in the shows like the Twilight Zone and the Hitchcock Hour. So I mean, it's
American Horror Show.
Yeah.
All those.
All right, well, unsurprisingly, for my next one, I'm going to go back to the BBC. This show I know for a fact is available on Amazon Prime and Hulu. It still might be on Netflix, and that's Peep Show. Peep Show is a British show developed by David Mitchell, who's an absolutely brilliant man, and Robert Webb, who also had a Mitchell and Webb comedy hour, which is like a Key and Peele, New Kids on or Kids Next Door kind of comedy sketch show. But Peep Show is a story of two college friends that are sort of an odd couple. You have sort of your tight-laced David Mitchell sort of plays intellectual that's, inferiority complex, and you have Robert Webb, who's sort of your slacker. And they've just been this mismatched duo that can't seem to get away from each other. And what's unique about Peep Show is, along with sort of the regular tropes of a sitcom, a single-cam sitcom, you're hearing their inner thoughts frequently. So you'll hear David Mitchell give a line, and then you'll hear in his brain what he's actually thinking. And it's just really dark, British, very funny humor. It went on for 9 seasons, and it's fantastic. But I think it's only 8 episodes per season, so you're not really too stuck in. But it's great.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go now to one that probably, of all the things that we've mentioned, even including your BBC, there might be less people familiar with this one than any of the things we talk about on the show, only because it premiered on a network called Audience, which I believe is only available on DirecTV.
I think so, yes.
But now I think the show I'm going to talk about, I think it's on Hulu.
Oh.
And it's the Mr. Mercedes trilogy by Stephen King. So the story of Mr. Mercedes, Finders, Keepers, and End of Watch for the 3 books.
Okay.
Bill Hodges is a detective played by an Irish actor. Unbelievably, I can't remember who it is, but he's really, really good. You know, the big burly guy with the beard, Jay?
Yeah.
And then the guy that played Brady, I mean, it's just really, really well done. They did it in 3 seasons, each one, picking up on the book and dragging it through. Just really, really well done. Scary villain, believable. And, it's one of those Stephen King stories where since the monster is a human, it's not really something you have to create. It translates much better from book to screen than some of the other things he's done.
Okay.
Because you don't have to create something and hope that this is what people had in mind when they read the story. It's just a guy that's a really, really bad guy.
Nice.
So it was really, really, really well done.
Okay. I'm going to go back to the HBO well, which we keep hitting, because HBO had a really nice run there.
Yeah.
I think a combination, it's probably somewhat in our genes. Sutton men, we love Westerns. And Deadwood is one of my all-time favorite Westerns. Once again, it's our favorite Tim the Oliphant, along with Ian McShane, who plays Swearingen, who's one of the coolest bad characters in TV history, in my opinion. And Deadwood takes place in the late 1800s, and it's right before it became a state. So Deadwood is sort of this city, this lawless-ish city, if you will. And Tim the Oliphant is a former marshal who was going to this town. He just wants to open up a hardware store and eventually have his brother's widow come join him with his son, and he's just going to, And then obviously the marshal in him can't let all the debauchery and bad things go, and it's historical. You have Wild Bill Hickok and Calamity Jane and some other people going in and out, but the flow almost feels like Shakespearean with the way they talk, like almost like Western Shakespearean. The one caveat I would give people, and this is a weird one for me to say, but just put up with the swearing for the first 2 episodes, because even myself,
it is out of control. That was the first impression I had when you and I talked about it.
Yeah.
I said, my God, how does this happen?
Because they do cut it down a little bit. Supposedly people swore that much back in the 1800s. I'm not sure if that's true or not. That's what the showrunner said. But it's no matter who you are, and you can't offend me. But I was like, wow, this is a lot of swearing. But the show itself is.
I got a new gold standard for swearing. It's the character Ruth in Ozark.
Okay.
And I don't know if anybody can outswear Ruth in Ozark.
Okay.
Those of you that have already seen Ozark, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
But Deadwood is really, really well done. Very, very authentic, very gritty beat.
Yes.
Great characters, though. Great characters. And speaking of which, before we go to our next movie, I want to give a shout out to the late Brian Dennehy, who died this week.
Yes.
And played the sheriff on Silverado. And I thought that's a very enjoyable Western to me, because it's very formulaic. It's kind of like spoofs all the formulas of Western, but it's so well acted and so well done. I just really have always enjoyed it. But Brian Dennehy passed this week, so a shout out to Brian Dennehy for all the enjoyment he gave us over the years. He was also in the movie Cocoon.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to go back to another Stephen Bochco, probably more famous really now because it was on for so many years, NYPD Blue. And your mother and I always liked the show, and again, they put it on audience, and they showed it in chronological order in audience. So over a period of 6 or 7 months, we watched every episode of NYPD back to back.
Wow.
So we never saw one out of order. And what I'll tell you is it's an amazing, amazing, amazing way to watch a character development. Because when you watch Sipowicz in the first couple shows, and you see him in the last season, the show ends with him getting an actual promotion to be the head of the squad. You could never see that if you just watched occasional episodes.
No.
But when you watched it over this arc of all these years, you see it. And then the other thing was amazing, amazing people that played his partner.
Yes.
Starting with David Caruso, who I thought was good, but Jimmy Smits to me was the absolute best partner for Sipowicz. He was really good. And then they followed it with Ricky Schroeder, and then they followed with
Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell. Mark Paul Gosselaar.
Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell, Mark Paul Gosselaar. And those were all really, really good characters to go with it. So that was really, it's one of my all-time favorites along with Hill Street Blues. I mean, I've always liked cop shows. Like I watch NYPD Blue now, or I watch Blue Bloods now, and I watch Chicago PD, and I enjoy those shows. But this is another one of those groundbreakers.
Okay, real quick before I get to my next show, I watched True Believers on Amazon Prime, which stars Jimmy Smits and Martin Sheen. It's like a voodoo cult movie about Santeria.
Yep.
It's really cool. It's worth a watch. Just throwing it out there. Jimmy Smits really good in it.
Yeah, I really like Jimmy Smits as an actor. He was on that show, this show that didn't make it, Bluff City.
Yeah.
And Mom and I really liked the show, but it obviously didn't get picked up, but we liked it.
Yeah, and he had a little run as he had a nice character arc on the biker show, Sons of Anarchy. He was really good in that as well.
Was he in West Wing as well?
I don't know. I didn't watch West Wing, but probably. But my next show, it's on Netflix right now. You can watch all sort of 5 seasons, but I'm going to talk specifically about the first 3 that air on Fox, and that's Arrested Development. It stars Jason Bateman from Ozark. People might know him from now. Along with, Will Arnett, Portia de Rossi, Jeffrey Tambor. It's just an amazing cast, and it's a very silly, very joke per minute sort of show. A lot of references, callbacks to other episodes. It's just, I find it to be a hysterically funny show. It's about a rich family, and that's in hot water, losing their money. I mean, they're not a likable family, and I know some people have trouble not with a non-likable. They're entertaining, but they're not exactly likable. And I think the show has a lot of roots in a show you showed me a long time ago called Soap, with a lot of callbacks, references to other characters on the show, things that happen in other episodes, and just a very silly, very fun show. The season 4, they filmed it in pieces when the cast couldn't be together. So it's
interesting.
Because it was when it went to Netflix, there was such a call to bring it back because it ended before they wanted to end it. So it's almost like 8 individual vignettes. Netflix did a thing where they recut the show and tried to put them in pieces so that they were happening chronologically, which I do enjoy a little bit more, but you're still not, what made that show so great is the cast together, the chemistry they had. And they do come back for a season 5, and you get to watch them interact again together. But it's the first 3 seasons, they never were able to quite recapture that magic. But it's a very just fun, silly show, and I think it's hard not to like.
I'm going to go with another one that lasted probably longer than a lot of people thought it would. I think it lasted 3 seasons. Kevin Bacon and Following.
Okay. You did love The Following.
And I love that show on Fox Network TV. And it's about, you know, we know that there are people that idolize serial killers.
Oh, yeah.
And we know there are serial killers have followings. And so this is a show about a serial killer with a following that uses social media to enable his followers to kill for him while he's in prison. And it's really, really, I loved it. I thought it was really well done. I loved Kevin Bacon in it. I loved the bad guy who was also in Rome.
Yes.
I can't remember what his name is. But he was really good. He's really believable. And whenever I'd see these plots unfurl, you know, I could never sit there and say, well, that could never happen. Because everything I saw could happen, which is what made it fun for me, which has made it interesting for me. And I've always kind of liked Kevin Bacon as an actor. He's kind of got an air about him. You know, I've liked him in Mystic River, the Dennis Lehane book, and there's a number of things he's done I really liked. And he's just one of those things he does really, really well.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go with a show that is about to have its 4th season. It's from the Coen Brothers movie Fargo, and it's the show Fargo. The thing about the show is every season is its own story within the Fargo universe. So having seen the previous season, you'll enjoy the next season each and every time. You can technically jump season to season. And they're the quirky, sort of dark humored crime where you've got a bunch of really interesting characters. You usually have every average gay guy or girl that's a little bit in over their head, and they keep getting more and more over their head, and they keep interacting with more and more sort of quirky, odd people, all trying to solve this thing, you know, to get the money, blackmail somebody, whatever it is. And it's wonderfully done. I'm watching Perpetual Grace, which is on Epix right now, and you can see the roots of that in Fargo. I mean, Fargo, like I said, it's a crime drama with a lot of quirky characters in it, and each character sort of has a very unique way of being on the screen. And sometimes it can get a little bit over the top, a little campy, but I just really, I like the story of, the guy finds, there's the easy job. It's like, that your boss doesn't have any security and he's got a bunch of money in a safe. And you just think, well, why couldn't we just rob it? Like, how easy could this be? We're not some stupid criminal. We're smarter than them. We're going to do it. And then you just see how it all falls apart. Or, somebody finds a bag of money on the side of the street and is like, this can change my life and how it's going to work. And then you watch it just tear things apart. And that's basically all of Fargo, and it's just fantastic.
Okay. I'm going to put one out there that, if you watch it, I don't know how you'll feel about it, but it's the only fiction series written and shot all over North America. So 116 episodes, none filmed in a studio. And Jason, you know how hard that would be.
Insanely hard. Yes.
So they're always going. And so they had shows were filmed in 40 different states. And they had a crew of 50 that would go to each location. And it was, it was describing two young adventurers in a Corvette exploring the early 60s social problems and changing mores, looking for the right place to settle down while finding themselves. It's kind of a Jack Kerouac kind of a thing.
Okay.
It's 3 years after On the Road. It's 3 years after that. So Todd's an Ivy Leaguer who inherited a Corvette. That's all he got from once upon a family. So you're getting money. So you got a Corvette. And he pairs up with Buzz, who's an orphan from Hell's Kitchen. And they just went all over the United States and saw different things. And I just think it's really, really one of those things I just really find it fascinating. The story's sometimes kind of hokey, but they're good stories about Americana. And the thing that really attracts me is that it wasn't filmed in a studio. This was real. So whenever they were in Pittsburgh, they were in Pittsburgh. Whenever in Chicago, they were in Chicago. And they went all along Route 66, even though Pittsburgh is not on Route 66. But they spend most of the time on and off the Route 66 areas.
Okay. Well, surprising. That just sparked. I have a list of shows here, and I don't think they're all going to actually make it. We'll just list them at the end, the ones we didn't make it. But I'm going to talk about a show that's been on the air for, I think, 18 seasons. And it's very similar in that you have two guys in a car going around the country, interacting with people, solving pseudo crimes, but they're supernatural crimes, and that's the show Supernatural. Supernatural is the story of Sam and Dean, these two brothers, and their dad was basically a sort of supernatural hunter. So he'll hunt vampires and wendigos, and you name sort of the mythological creature. He has a book on it, and his two sons are out to find him. And Sam is about to go to medical school. He's sort of a preppy. And Dean drives an old Chevette, like the Chevelle, the big-ass muscle car, listens to classic rock. He eats crummy food. But I will say this, as someone that has a brother, it's one of the best portrayals of brothers in a television show. The two have amazing chemistry, and there's so many, like, the fights they have feel very real. They feel very much like brothers. And the bond they share is very much a brotherly bond, where, it's that, there are times where you can't stand each other, but you still love each other and that sort of thing. And I think that's one of the things the show does best. In the first probably 6 or 7 seasons, it's almost like a tour through, a museum of supernatural creatures. So like I said, you get a Wendigo and you get all these different regions, and they're looking for a different supernatural creature. And, how do you stop this creature? And then they also revisit, there's a Bloody Mary episode, with the say Bloody Mary in a mirror 5 times kind of thing. There's the woman on the road. It has a lot of those things. And the other thing they do really well in the later seasons, they have a lot of very meta episodes where it's very tongue-in-cheek and laughing at the audience. And they do that incredibly well. Now, I would say the show goes on probably longer than you would think it would need to, as it just finished its 18th season. But it's really well done. It's like a fun, Monster of the Week show for the most part, with a really good brother portrayal in it.
I like the way you described it, though.
What seemed to fit after Route 66, I'm like, well, that is two brothers in a classic car driving along, getting interaction with people. So I'm like, it's kind of like a next step, if you will, but with the supernatural influence.
Okay, I'm going to give you one that's on right now, and the final episode is tomorrow night.
Oh.
And it's The Plot Against America on HBO, based on a Philip Roth novel. I think I alluded to it a little bit last week, but it's made my list now. And what I really is getting to me right now is in these protests we saw this week about the stay-at-home thing in Lansing, Michigan, and they were kind of like there were swastikas and there were kind of things like this that people kind of out of control.
Yeah.
And I look at what our president does now, being able to rile people up to do what I would call idiotic things.
Most definitely.
And I look back at this with Lindbergh, and it seems that when Charles Lindbergh, who really didn't become president, was president, his relationship with Nazi Germany, it seemed to enable a lot of people to express their feelings that maybe they kept to themselves normally, but all these violent feelings came out against the Jews in America in this fictional series. And it kind of reminds me of like what's going on right now, so I think it's a good thing for people to watch.
Okay.
Because when you believe nothing could happen like this, something could happen like this, and you could argue something is happening like this. So if we got any Trump fans among our listeners, I apologize for bringing this up in a negative light. I don't apologize for how I feel about Trump.
Right. Well, I'll go with what is maybe the greatest satire television show of my lifetime. That I think got a lot more respect once they won a Tony on Broadway. And that's South Park by Matt and Trey. I say, again, much like being a brother with the last show, as having been a kid, as everyone has, I feel oddly like the relationship between Stan, Kenny, Kyle, and Eric is probably the most realistic portrayal of children on television. Or at least it was, like, my friends and I were like that to each other. There was some sweet moments and things along the lines, but it was a lot of, being kind of rotten to each other. But I feel like South Park, the writing is so crisp and so, like, the satire is so deep. And it does offend a lot of people. I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't. And they do go sophomoric with, butt jokes and, fart jokes, just probably to a level that some people can't take. But, Norman Lear, who wrote, who actually worked on the show, South Park, had the same sort of situation with All in the Family, where there's people that just couldn't get a comprehend of how that show act like who the show was actually making fun of. You know?
You know, I've watched it, and I always laugh.
Yeah.
It's just one of those shows where there's something there. It might be totally irreverent. I mean, you know, if it's not for South Park, we don't ever have Book of Mormon on Broadway.
No.
So, I mean, this pushes the envelope of sarcasm and ridicule further than it's ever been pushed. And it's found an audience, and that's an amazing staying power.
Amazing staying
power.
I
can think of, when Cartman was going to be a Somalian pirate.
Yeah.
And I must have laughed hard for 10 minutes.
And again,
yeah.
And that show, I mean, not to invoke too many buzzwords of today, but like that episode, you could argue is the perfect example of white privilege. If you want to talk about, male privilege, white privilege, whatever, because I mean, besides being hysterically funny as Cartman and the boys decide that they want to be Somali pirates, you also actually get to see how rough and why the people of Somalia are forced to do what they do. I mean,
Yes.
The show has a moral core and a moral compass that it always gets back to.
It does. There's always a lesson.
Now, you may not enjoy
There's always a lesson. You may not get it directly, but there's always a lesson, which I really like.
And I feel like the majority of the critics feel like those lessons are hidden too far behind, for lack of a better term, offensive material. But the lessons are there. And like I said, I think it's a brilliant, brilliant show that's made me laugh countless times. So, South Park.
Yeah, I think it's well done.
And I know it's on Comedy Central, and I think
that's the end of my list, Jack.
Okay, I'll throw out one more because I feel like I can't not say it. Much like Game of Thrones, I wasn't sure if I was going to throw this one on there, but it's The American Office. Now, I know listening to the first two podcasts, you would assume that I prefer the British one, and on many levels, I still do. I will say that I saw the British Office before I saw the American Office. I was always a big Ricky Gervais fan, and I liked that sort of British humor. And I think the brevity of the first British Office makes more sense as a character. But I've probably seen every episode of The Office 5 times. And I know I sort of railed against sort of the thought of the comfort level show in the beginning, but I think this is a perfect sort of comfort level show. And I think there's something on there's a lot to like on this show, a lot of episodes. I think, it's incredibly cast. Like, that's what I noticed the last time I watched episodes. Like Phyllis and Stanley and Meredith, like they don't look like Kevin. Those people don't look like, they look like people that would work in a paper factory in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And I think their personalities all fit. And I think it's a really well done show that, I don't know. It's just like, I just really enjoy it.
Sure.
And then I had 4 more shows on my list. I'm just going to throw the names out. Breaking Bad, people have heard infinite about it. If you want to watch Breaking Bad, Netflix, you should watch Breaking Bad. A new show that was too new to make the list is What We Do in the Shadows, which is also on FX on Hulu. It's based on the movie What We Do in the Shadows, which is sort of the mockumentary about vampires. It's hysterical. Black Books, which is another BBC show that stars an Irishman, surprisingly, but it's a very, very goofy British show about running a bookstore. And then lastly, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which is another show that just, I know Mom and you like Charlie Day from It's Always Sunny, and just a really, really funny show. It's Always Sunny fits into the category of shows where you probably aren't going to like anybody on the show, at least not, but it's just a fairly funny show. So I just had to throw those 4 the ones out. Yeah.
I like that one. What else you got? Any more you want to throw out?
I think that's about it I think that was like about 25 shows I listed, so.
Let me see if there's anything else I would just throw out there. The Outsider. Stephen King that was on.
Oh, that was really, really well done. Yeah.
Boardwalk Empire.
Yes.
Which was built really on the success of Sopranos. And it was almost like The Sopranos in a time warp, going back to the 20s and 30s. You'd like this one, The Suspicions of Mr. Witcher.
Oh, I actually have it on my watch list on Amazon Prime. I just haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, it's on Amazon Prime. It's maybe the early 1900s, and it's based upon a guy that loses his police license, becomes a private investigator, as so many of those shows do. But this is really, really well done. I really enjoyed it, and I think that's the last one on my list.
Oh, I guess I'll give one shout out to Carnival, another HBO show that I know myself and my friend Clark. I think we're the only two people in the world that actually watched and enjoyed the show, but it's a really cool show. It's another one though that when you start it feels much more like reading a book than watching a show. It takes a few episodes for it to get to the point where I think a modern audience would enjoy the pacing, because the pacing is, for some people, slow. I found it nuanced. So, you know, it's worth watching though, especially now that you can't leave your house.
Yes, and it's so for Mom and I, it marks 5 weeks yesterday.
Yeah, I think my last day of work on the show was April 1st. So I'm going into week 3.
Wow. So what would you like for our show next week, Jay?
That's a good question. I think
We've done TV, we've done music, we've done movies.
we've done a lot of food.
Yeah.
I think next week, I mean, I'd love to do sort of a mailbag episode if people have questions. If people are listening at home, that would be fantastic. If not, we'll sort of surprise you. We'll talk off air and talk this week, and we'll come up with some stuff.
Yeah, we'll figure something out.
We are getting close to
I do
the...
want to point out one I think that's going to be tremendous, starting tonight, The Last Dance on ESPN, about the last championship of Michael Jordan. I think it's 10 episodes, and two of them are on tonight, starting at 9 o'clock.
Okay. And we got the draft coming up, the virtual draft, which is still exciting.
We do have the draft coming up, so we can talk about the draft and how it went and we thought about it. When is that, next weekend, right?
It's next weekend.
Whoa, here we go. Something.
Yeah, I think is it next weekend or the weekend after? I can't remember exactly which one it is.
Yeah, I actually think it is next weekend.
I think it is, yeah. I love the NFL draft, and I'm fine with a virtual draft. I don't need to see people standing up and, I don't like the...
We'll actually get to be... Everybody will actually be... I think it'll be the highest rated NFL draft in history.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Now, it's a bummer because our Steelers don't have a first-round pick, but we'll get over it.
But there's so much speculation about that second-round pick. I'm so looking forward to it.
Yes, indeed.
Do you have a preference for that second pick?
I think they need a weapon. I think when I look at this draft, it seems like there's a lot of wide receivers that are really good wide receivers. And I would love to see one of the better ones fall to the Steelers. Because as much as I like Deontay Johnson, Washington, and Juju, I still think I don't think any of those guys are number one wide receivers. And I think if one of those guys go down, they're in a lot of trouble. So I think a wide receiver or a running back, some kind of offensive playmaker, I think is what they need right now.
Well, do you think they take the running back from Wisconsin if he falls to them?
It's hard to imagine that. I mean, it's one of those things, though, like, just from, don't touch the stove again. I was excited, obviously, for, Lima Sweet and Jarvis Jones and some other perennial or, historic Steeler flops during my lifetime. And it seems like if somebody is that good, supposedly that good as a college player, and they continually drop to the point where your team would be able to get them that late, it's probably not a very good sign.
Well, I don't think they think he's going to be a second round pick.
Yeah, it just depends on how they go. Yeah, I mean, I would be happy with it. Like I said, I think they need they need a home run threat on offense, whether that's at the running back position, which I don't think they have anybody that can play running back. And I think they need another wide receiver. Maybe somebody that does something that the other guys don't do. Maybe that's a third-round pick,
So what about Jalen Hurst?
I do like Jalen Hurts because I don't, as you know, I've spoken poorly about, Mason Rudolph. And as much as I love the Duck, I don't think he's an NFL quarterback. And I don't think Ben's got a year in him, let alone 2. So I just don't know, though. This is such a weird year, obviously, with the way things are going. If the Steelers maybe this is just take the best players available, regardless of position, knowing that this probably, for a number of levels, I don't think this is the Steelers' year. hopefully they prove me wrong, and I have to eat crow, and that'll be delicious crow for me. But
Sure. All right, everyone. Surprise show next week.
all right.